Let me have the parties identified.
Gary Mitchell with the Lubbock County District Attorney's Office on behalf of the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services. The department appears by and through St. Francis Ministries caseworker Mariah Marino and Supervisor Karonda Slay. We are present and ready to proceed.
Jim Shaw representing the grandmother.
Katie Mason, attorney for respondent grandfather who has some medical issues and is not present.
Lindsay Murray on behalf of the children.
McKenna Shelton Casa. And Tiffany Hicks, my advocate, is also present.
Okay, Ms. Murray, you have a motion pending before the court to move the child Linda to Aunt Robin. Is that correct?
That is correct, Judge.
Mr. Mitchell, what is the department's position on that request?
Your Honor, we are objecting to the move of Linda to the home of Mrs. Tillman.
What?
Ms. Moore or Ms. Tillman?
Are you talking about Linda Tillman or are you talking about Robin Tillman?
Oh, I'm sorry. We have no objection to moving to Robin Tillman. I'm sorry. I was looking at trying to get this thing all together here.
Mr. Shaw, what is your client's position on moving the child Linda to Aunt Robin?
She's objecting to that. We filed our own motion requesting all three of the children be placed with her.
Ms. Mason, what is your client's position with respect to moving the child Linda to Aunt Robin?
Your Honor, our client's in agreement with Linda remaining where she is, and so he's objecting to movement at this time.
Casa, do you have a position on this at this point?
Yes, Your Honor. Casa is recommending that the child be placed with Robin, the aunt.
Okay, and Mr. Shaw's client is wanting placement of all three of the children back with her. Mr. Mitchell, what is the department's position on that request?
Your Honor, department objects to any of the children being moved to the home of the grandmother, Mrs. Tillman.
Ms. Mason, what is your client's position with respect to moving the children back home with mom?
Your Honor, he wants the children returned.
Ms. Murray, what do you have a position? I'm assuming since you're requesting placement with an aunt today that you have a position with respect to Mr. Shaw's client's request?
Yes, for the Autumn and Trinity to remain where they are for right now, and Linda to be placed with Aunt Robin.
Casa, do you have a position with respect to placing the children back with mom?
Casa echoes what Miss Murray says, that Autumn and Trinity that they remain in their current placement, and that Linda, the child, be placed with Robin. We are not recommending that all three children remain, or that they are placed with the grandparents. Sorry about that.
It's kind of complicated, I understand. All right, we'll go first with Miss Murray. You want to call your first witness?
So I'm just going with regard to Linda, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then I'd invoke the rule.
All right, other than my experts who are here, or do we have any fact witnesses that need to be put in the waiting room?
I would say Helen Moore. I think my client, Linda, was actually here. I think you might have moved her, Judge. Sorry. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Was she in the flower box?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Perhaps we can take up, before we get started, I think we could take up Mr. Shaw's motion with arguments. Mr. Shaw, tell me from your perspective why your client believes that placement back with her today is appropriate.
My client has started her services. She believes that in the best interest of the children, that the children should be placed with her. Apparently, when she talks to the children, she gets different information than what's being told in court and to others. So she feels that even the children want to come home with her. At this point, she doesn't see any barrier as far as having placement with her, and she believes that the children would best be served in her home.
Okay, who's my worker?
Mariah Marino.
Miss Marino, tell me who the kid's therapist is.
So Linda sees I think Valerie Martin at Flyer, and then the kids are doing the family therapy with Mr. Gatlin.
Okay, then we probably do need some testimony on the mother's motion. So it probably makes more sense to take up Mr. Shaw's motion first. I'm sorry. I think obviously we don't want to move one of the children to a placement if the plan and the court's ruling is to move all the children back with the mother today. So Mr. Shaw, do you want to call your first witness?
Judge, I just have my client and Mr. Gatlin, but Gary subpoenaed Mr. Gatlin, so I don't know if you want him to call him or if I can go ahead and call him, however y'all want to do it.
Your Honor, if he's asking me, my preference is I subpoenaed Mr. Gatlin, but I would like him to be present through the testimony and use him after testimony's been received by the court.
Okay, Mr. Shaw, if you'll go ahead and call him, Mr. Gatlin.
And Judge, as far as expert, I'm asking the parties if they will stipulate to him being an expert.
Any objection to the court considering the testimony of Mr. Gatlin to be that of an expert in licensed professional counseling?
No, Your Honor.
Objection.
Okay, court will consider the testimony of Mr. Gatlin to be that of an expert. Go ahead, Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Gatlin, during this case, are you, in addition to seeing Miss Linda Tillman, the grandmother, but are you also seeing the children?
Not individually, but in family therapy.
And can you describe how that is going?
We've had one session, which took place on March 21st, and we're scheduled again. And since we've just had one session, we've just broken the ice and laid the groundwork for our purpose.
As far as the logistics of the therapy, is this over Zoom?
Yes.
And so if the older Linda is moved out of this area, would she still be able to do the therapy with you?
Yes.
And as far as the individual therapy with the grandmother, Ms. Tillman, how is that therapy going?
Well, it's going okay. I discontinued it whenever we started family therapy, but I intend to start it up again, the individual, but it's going okay.
And when you want to start it up again, is there other issues that you want to deal with?
Yes.
And what would they be?
It would be the understanding the children's reaction to the problems which led to the opening of the case, the children in the family therapy session, some of their comments and complaints. I need to be able to talk with the mother or grandmother, one-on-one and review and reflect on what the girls are saying so that she understands what's going on and can make some changes.
So some issues came up in the family therapy that is prompting the individual counseling?
Yes.
And as far as these issues, the case kind of began with the kids being, I would say, unhappy with the placement because of the restrictions that they had. Is that still something that they're dealing with?
Yes, they're still unhappy about grandmother.
In what way?
Well, in general, all three of them reflected an unhappiness because of the way she talked to them and treated them when they lived with her. The anger, the yelling, the threats.
And is that something that you have worked with the grandmother before?
We've addressed that, yes.
And do you believe that she is understanding what you're saying?
Well, yes, to a degree.
Does she object? Well, does she agree that those behaviors that are being told to you actually occurred? Or is she denying?
Well, most of them, yes. The primary complaint that the girls had, she was yes, she acknowledged that.
And as far as the request of the grandmother to have all three of the children placed with her today, is that something that you're supporting?
No,
And I would just say from what you've already testified, is that because you need to do some individual counseling with the grandmother and some more family counseling?
that's right. And more and more.
And when you say and more, what does that mean?
The children need to be and as far as I understand, the children are in individual counseling. I don't think Trinity and Autumn were mentioned as being in individual counseling, but it is my understanding that they are. And that would need to continue also. And of course, we've just had one session and we need more time to make progress.
I'll pass the witness, General.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Gatlin, when you asked if Mrs. Tillman had an understanding as to the comments of the girls, I guess, that led to the removal. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, you said she's agreed that some of those things happened. Could you be clear as to what she's agreed to and what she hasn't agreed to?
She has acknowledged that she was hateful to them, that she made hateful comments, and yelled at them and made threats to them. The part that she does not acknowledge, and the part that she says did not happen, was anything having to do with any physical abuse. And that's the component part that she rejects and denies, and says that just those things did not happen, but the other parts did.
In your history of your work, when children report things, can we take those on face value?
Well, they do have to be investigated, but we have to err on the side of caution and assume that they may be true. They may also not be true. If there's no reason to believe they may not be true, I think we weigh heavier on the side that they probably were true. I mean, typically children don't make spontaneous complaints about people unless there's an underlying problem or some sort of family dynamic that may contribute to it.
In the therapy sessions that you've had with Ms. Tillman, are you also working not just on what she's accepted as being the truth, but also on what the children have relayed?
Yeah, well, yes.
And you said at the beginning that she's doing pretty good, I think, use my words. Is that with respect to accepting and working on issues that involved her verbal condemnation of the children?
Yes, that's the part she has gained awareness of. She understands that she was verbally abusive. She made some very harsh comments and threats to them. And that's a part that she does understand. The other side of that is, which is so difficult for parents, is understanding what that really means to the child and the emotional abuse. Many times it's a one-sided understanding and awareness. I see what I'm doing, but I don't fully see the whole picture of how what I did really impacted emotionally in the heart of the other person. In this case, it's children. That could be said of spouses too.
When you talk with a client such as Ms. Tillman, and they don't accept some of the responsibility here in this instance, the fact that there may have been some physical contact, how do you approach fixing something that a patient won't admit exists?
Well, if we continue to harp on it, it just creates a problem. And we just try to move on and try to address it on the whole as if there was a lot of problems going on. And the parenting style and her anger led to all of this. And sometimes I find that people will come out later with more about what happened once they start to understand and work toward personal change.
Whenever you take on a new patient, is it important for you to get a good history of that patient and to what has perhaps led them to needing the therapy that you provide?
Yes.
And as part of the things that you have discussed with Mrs. Tillman, I believe from your therapy notes that you note that she had lost a daughter herself just a few years ago. Is that correct?
Yes.
What effect do you see, or can you attribute the effect of the death of her daughter affecting how she reacts or how she treats these three girls?
Well, in my opinion, it had a huge impact. Her daughter died, I think it's only been about a year and a half, and maybe about 1 year at the mark of when the children were removed. And so while she was dealing with, as she reports, difficult children to raise because they had no structure or parenting prior to being placed with her, she was trying to manage that on top of the death of her daughter. And I think that probably had a lot to do with some of her frustration and anger and lack of support. She was just doing it on her own, taking care of the kids.
She doesn't get any support at home. Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding. There's not much support from her husband.
And he has some health problems, which also makes it more difficult. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what I understand.
Did you have an opportunity to look at Mrs. Tillman's psychological evaluation when you were taking the history and getting prepared to provide her the therapy?
I don't recall that I have seen her psychological evaluation.
Did you observe, or could you tell from your sessions with her that she may have been suffering from depression?
Well, that was my opinion. Yes.
That was your diagnosis. If I told you that was in the psychological, you would agree that that is what you yourself have noticed.
Yes.
Is she on any type of medication?
Yes.
And what is she taking for that depression?
Antidepressant.
And do you notice a change in her over the past few months regarding your diagnosis or your perception that she has depression?
Well, I don't know. I think she's still depressed. I think she's more comfortable in our talks. I think she has found them to be maybe mildly helpful to her. I don't know if the depression is any better, but she certainly has been very willing and very cooperative to discuss the reasons that she's involved with CPS.
Has she described to you that these three girls are very difficult for her to control or to raise?
Yes.
Has she specifically described, at least with respect to the young girl, Linda, that she suffers from some issues that she thinks that as the mother she can address?
Well, yes, she has expressed that Linda has some serious behavioral, emotional problems. She has expressed that she can handle those. She thinks that she's better off with family.
In your opinion, from your time that you've spent with her, do you feel that she's at a level right now where she could handle the, not just all three, but specifically the issues that Linda has exhibited in the past, or as the mother describes her emotional needs?
Well, I don't know that she's ready yet. Linda would be a challenge for anyone, even a stable person.
Would it be important that Mrs. Tillman have some specific, not just therapy, but training in raising or being with a child who's exhibiting some mental or emotional disturbances?
Yes, I would agree with that.
And has Mrs. Tillman had any of that to your knowledge?
Well, not to my knowledge. She's attended she's had some parent classes, attended some parent training.
And I believe in your note, she's acknowledged that she's seen in her therapy or in her parenting classes, she's recognized herself in some of the situations that exhibit less than better parenting, I guess.
Yes.
And I think at one point in time, did she describe that as being embarrassing?
Yes.
Did she tell you that Lindas, I get confused. Did young Linda tell Mrs. Tillman that she felt unsafe in her home, in Mrs. Tillman's home?
That's right. Yes.
And again, I go back to the question I spoke with you earlier. When a child of her age, especially, that makes that comment, we can't just push it aside and say that can't be correct, or we can't just disbelieve it. Is that a fair statement?
Right. I would think that's a fair statement.
And did Mrs. Tillman express to you how it made her feel when young Linda told her that she felt unsafe?
Yes.
And what was Miss Tillman's response?
She did not think that was the type of statement that would come naturally from a child of Linda's age.
Did she accuse someone of prompting her to say that?
That's what she suspected that someone had said it to her and Linda was repeating it.
Did she make any response? Or let me strike that question. So would it be fair to say that she still rejects what Linda is telling her?
Well, I think that's one way of looking at it, yes.
And if she's rejecting that, how would one go about fixing that problem or treating her for that issue of not believing her daughter?
Well, this is one of the reasons I want to go back to the individual counseling and talk to Linda, grandmother, about the girls and what these expressions that the girls are providing the people they talk to about the relationship with their grandmother. These are damaged relationships that need to be repaired. And in order for them to really be prepared, the parent, the grandmother, must understand her impact on the grandchildren emotionally and what that has done to them. And it's not really enough to say, well, I'll take care of it, just give them back to me. The problem has not really been fully addressed. I think we're on the way, and I can't predict what will happen when this is all over. But certainly there has to be more than one perspective. The acknowledgement and the awareness gained, of course, doesn't always produce a practice, the implementation and practice of what you understand. So we've got some room to make improvement.
So her accepting, let me back up. Would it be fair to say that her just accepting that that's how Linda feels when she says she feels unsafe? Would it be a fair statement to say that in addition to that Mrs. Tillman would also have to accept the therapy or the guidance in overcoming her disbelief in that type of a statement?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Tell me, if you will, you just had the first meeting of group therapy last Friday? Thursday. How did that go?
Well, it went very well. The girls were open. Everyone was talkative. They were able to talk about some of the reasons that, their memories of living with their grandmother, and Linda, mother Linda, was able to talk to them and acknowledge what she did. They got a chance to hear her say that she did the things that they accused her of. Not all of it.
So again, back to, she's denying any physical situation involving the girls. Is that correct?
Yes, we can draw the distinction between physical and the emotional. She acknowledges the emotional, she denies the physical.
Was this the first time that these young girls had heard that she had denied the physical portion?
I'm not aware of that. It was the first time that the grandmother and Trinity and Autumn had seen each other since they were removed. She's been seeing Linda, but I'm not aware if they have heard her say that. That is a question I would have asked, and I would have to go back in my notes and look. I would probably remember that, but I can't answer that. But that's a good question to answer.
So is that one of the top questions you're going to be searching for answers when you continue with your group therapy?
Yes.
When is your next group therapy session set, and how often do you plan to meet with them?
Every 2 weeks, and the next appointment is April 4th, Thursday, April 4th at 6 p.m.
Mr. Gatlin, would you agree with me that now is not the time to reunite these children with Mrs. Tillman?
I would agree with you.
There's a lot of work that is yet to be done, sorting out the emotional situations and what therapy perhaps to be directed to help resolve those issues?
I think if we're going to have a successful reunification, those steps must be taken.
Is it possible to even put a time frame around that?
Well, we got to work pretty quickly. I mean, the ice was broken fairly quickly in the first session, so we're not going to waste a lot of time. But I don't know. It just depends on everyone's capacity for change. And it also depends on these little girls and their capacity to forgive their grandmother and to see, and it's a lot. I think it's possible. But again, capacity on the part of the grandmother and capacity on the part of the children.
I don't even know if this is a fair question. Children versus adults, who's the easiest to accept the bad things about others?
Well, children, I think, they're very forgiving. Usually children will forgive their parents, typically. It's harder for adults to change, I think.
I will pass the witness, Your Honor.
Ms. Mason?
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, Mr. Gatlin, when did you begin seeing Miss Tillman for therapy?
November 20th, 2023.
Okay, and since that time, have you seen a positive change in Miss Tillman?
Yes.
And have you worked with Miss Tillman on alternative methods for discipline of the children?
Well, we've explored all of that, but we've not gotten to any practical application.
Okay. Have you worked with Ms. Tillman about how to manage frustrations or stressors when it comes to parenting children?
Yes.
Okay. And do you think that she is, from what you can tell in your sessions with her, does she seem to be acknowledging it and wanting to change?
I think so.
Okay. Is it your preference to have these? So Linda is 9, I believe, and Autumn is 6. With children of those ages, would your preference be to have these family therapy sessions in person?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And if the children were ultimately placed back in the home of Mr. and Mrs. Tillman in Lubbock, those therapy sessions could take place in person. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Were you aware that Linda, the child, was just recently placed back in early January, in her current placement?
Yes.
And if she were to move again with her aunt, that would be 2 placements in, I guess, a 3-month span, approximately.
Yes.
Okay. And if she were to be moved some point after today's hearing, you would also agree with me with that would be in the middle of a school year as well.
Yes.
Okay. How difficult is it for children to change placements?
Well, it is difficult, especially when it comes to the school, having to change schools in the middle of a semester. Anytime in a semester is hard.
Okay. And you said that they were making that you had your first session, and though they're making progress pretty quickly.
Well, I think what I said was everyone started opening up and talking fairly quickly. I mean, about what happened at home.
Okay. Okay. And do you know, since Linda, the child, is placed in Loveland, do you know how often Mrs. Tillman is visiting her in person?
I think once a week or once
Okay.
every 2 weeks, maybe.
And did Linda, the child, express to you whether or not she enjoys those visits with her grandmother?
We didn't really talk about that. I don't remember her saying anything about that.
Okay.
She was happy to see her when I saw her on my virtual website.
And it was, just for clarification, the therapy session that you had, it was with all 3 of the girls as well as Mrs. Tillman?
That's right. And Mrs.
Okay.
Tillman, to be clear, Mrs. Tillman was in my office,
Okay.
and all 3 of the girls were seen virtually.
Okay. Do you know where the potential placement is located?
I don't know.
Okay. if I were to say Tyler, Texas, do you know if does that ring any bells? Did Miss Moreno talk to you about the potential placement?
No, but I do recall that it was in the central Texas. I knew that, I did know that it was not locally.
Okay. And is it important for children and even their grandparents who have taken the role of their parents to have continuous and in-person visits?
Yes.
Okay. And if she were to move to Tyler, Texas, hours away, does that make it more difficult for Mrs. Tillman to have these in-person visits with Linda?
Yes, it would.
Okay. Do you think that would be harmful to Linda, the child?
Well, I don't know that I could say it would be harmful. It certainly would not be the best case scenario. If she's having in-person visits, it would be better if she could continue to have in-person visits.
And I know you've only had one session, so maybe you're not sure, but does it seem as if Linda, the child, has the most difficult relationship with her grandmother out of all three girls?
Well, I'm not sure I can answer it that way.
Okay.
I could go on if you want me
Sure,
to.
sure.
Well, it's tricky because Linda has the most behavioral problems and emotional problems, but Linda does seem to be, Linda child, but she does seem to be, she communicates pretty well with her grandmother. The other two, especially Trinity, there's definitely more tension on the part of especially Trinity.
Okay. Does it make it more, if the ultimate goal is to repair this relationship between all three girls and Miss Tillman and even Mr. Tillman, does that make it more difficult when these children are placed in places that, that are hours away?
Well, yes, and I'm just speaking from the therapeutic point of view and the visitation, the contact. I just think contact in person is that's so much superior to contact through the computer. In-person contact is always preferred. And of course, therapy is the same way. I think we get much more accomplished when we have everybody in my office compared to people spread out all over Texas.
And ultimately, if the children were returned to Mr. and Mrs. Tillman, you could continue the family therapy sessions.
Well, yes, that's true. Mhm.
I'll pass witness, Your Honor.
Ms. Murray?
Is it in a child's best interest to remain in an RTC when there is a family placement available?
Well, I think if the child's ready to be discharged and there is a relative that the child is familiar with, I think that would be the preference, except if the child's ready to be discharged.
Right. And so if Linda would be ready to be discharged, wouldn't it be, I guess, better for her to be with family rather than in a facility or in a group home?
Yes.
And have you been able to see Linda, little Linda, interact with her sisters?
Yes.
Okay. And do they have kind of a close bond?
Well, they appeared to. Of course, they weren't together. They could see each other on the screen, and they were
Right.
laughing and cutting up and giggling. And yes, they were happy to see one another.
Are you aware how far or what the distance is between the placement of the two older girls with Helen Moore versus if Linda were placed with Robin Tillman? Are you aware of the distance between those two homes?
Well, I would have to look on the map
Okay.
to see
Would you
where
say-
Tyler is Tyler in relation to Dallas Fort Worth.
Okay, well, would it surprise you that Tyler and Dallas Fort Worth are closer than Loveland and Dallas Fort
Okay,
Worth? Would that
no,
surprise
right.
you?
I did
Okay.
know that. Yeah.
And do you think it would be a positive, I guess, a positive thing if the girls would be able to spend more time with each other in person if placed closer together? Would that be a positive thing?
Yes.
have you had the ability, well, have you talked to any of I think Dr. Robertson is the older girls therapist, and then I believe that Linda recently just started seeing her therapist. Have you been able to visit with any of them about the individual therapy of the girls?
No.
I'll pass the witness.
Mr. Shaw,
I don't have any further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Mitchell,
I don't have any other questions of this witness, Your Honor.
Ms. Mason.
Just very briefly, Mr. Gatlin, do you know how Linda, the child, is doing in her current placement?
No, I don't, and that's information I don't have. I've tried to find out, but I'm not really aware of that.
Okay, and Miss Moreno hasn't told you whether or not she's doing well in her current school as well?
I'm not aware of her academic progress, no.
Okay, and if she were to move from her current placement, would that also mean that she would potentially have to move or change therapists as well that handles her individual therapy?
Yes.
Okay. And so whenever you as a therapist is having or is beginning a relationship with a new client, does it take some time to build rapport with those clients?
Yes.
And so Linda, the child, would be having to start all over with a brand new therapist.
Yes, but although that would happen if she moved out of an RTC anyway. Usually the RTC therapist wraps their work up and when the person moves, the client.
Right. If the judge ultimately doesn't place Linda back with Mr. and Mrs. Tillman, but she continued to reside at this RTC, she could continue to have the same therapist.
That's right.
Okay. Ultimately, if all three children were placed back home with the Tillmans, they could continue that relationship, continue to bond with each other as siblings do.
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any additional questions.
Any more questions for Mr. Gatlin? And let me say, any more questions for Mr. Gatlin, either on placement back with mom or placement with Aunt Robin?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Okay, any objection to Mr. Gatlin being free to go if he
No, Your
wishes?
Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Gatlin, you're free to go if you wish.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shaw, next witness.
I would call Miss Tillman, unless Lindsay needs to do something before we have 15 minutes.
Miss Murray, is your hearing in person?
It is.
Okay, then we need to recess. Miss Murray, do you have any idea how long it might take?
Possibly, I could possibly get it done in 30 minutes.
Okay. Why don't you send an email to all the parties when you're finished?
Yes, ma'am.
And headed back to your office. And that way send an email to me, and then I'll start the meeting back up again.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, and tell all of the people, let me pull in all the people from the waiting room. On a couple of motions for placement. Mr. Shaw, we left off with your next witness.
Judge, I would call the grandmother, Miss Tillman.
All right, Mr. Shaw.
Ms. Tillman, we filed a motion in this case. Can you tell the judge what you're requesting?
May I speak with just the judge and the lawyers only?
No, ma'am.
Well, I can't answer a lot of questions. Some questions I cannot answer.
Would you like to visit with your attorney?
I would like to visit with you.
You can't do that with all the lawyers in CASA present. Is there somebody in the room right now that you don't want to talk in front of?
No, I just want to talk to you and the attorneys. No one else.
Okay, well, CASA's a party to the case, so they have to be involved in the discussion.
It's just one CASA, right, Tiffany?
The volunteer and her supervisor, yes, ma'am.
This is the supervisor right here. This is her supervisor. Okay.
Okay, can I get you to raise your right hand?
Does Dr. Beth has to be in there?
Yes, she's the expert and well, let me just ask, Mr. Mitchell, are you okay with Dr. Robinson being in the waiting room?
Your Honor, actually Gary just called me. I think he's on his way back, but I have him on my speaker.
I'm gonna close out and try to re-enter.
Ms. Murray, do you have an objection if Dr. Robinson leaves and comes back when we're ready for her testimony?
I mean, Dr. Robinson knows the two older children. She has a relationship with them. She's a therapist for them. I believe that she should be allowed to hear what Ms. Tillman has to say.
I don't have any doubt that Dr. Robinson, if the parties wish, for her to be in the room, that she's allowed because she's an expert. I'm just asking, if you object to her being released at this point. And come back, obviously, when you're ready for her testimony.
And I clarify my relationship, just so you know. Lindsay, actually, it's the second and fourth kiddo that I'm currently seeing. And I also have a history with the child, Linda. I started seeing these kids, the child who's not party to this, I started seeing in January of 22. And I wrote the dates down. I started seeing Trinity and Linda in March of 22, and I started seeing Autumn in January of 24.
Okay, Mr. Shaw, your client doesn't want to testify apparently if Dr. Robinson's in the room. Do you have your next witness?
Well, for the record, I'd object to Dr. Robinson being in there. She's not a party, and that she's just a witness, and she doesn't have a right to be in the room.
Overruled.
I would ask that we have a breakout room where I can talk to the attorneys and my client in the breakout room then.
Okay, we'll take a break.
Excuse me, Your Honor, I don't see CPS people. I don't see either Karanda or, there's Karanda, okay, I'm sorry, or Mariah, but there's Karanda.
I haven't seen Mariah join us yet, so we need to make sure that she's notified that we're back. Okay, Ms. Tillman, can I get you to raise your right hand? You solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give me will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Mr. Shaw?
Ma'am, before the break, I had asked you the question as to what you're asking the court to do today.
I want the children back.
And do you think that the children are ready to come home?
Yes, I do.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is so?
I respect Mr. Gatlin, but I told him the other day that I disagree with him. And anyway, Judge, I had to go back a little bit because things that maybe you need to know. I don't know, but I hate to do this. But the kid's mother was meant for.
And I, really quickly, as the attorney ad litem, Linda is in this room and I know what Miss Linda's about to say.
I tried to do that. I didn't know Linda was there. I don't see her.
Well, she's here, so I know what you're going to say. So maybe can we put little Linda in a different room for right now?
Yes. Okay, go ahead, ma'am.
Sorry.
Thank you.
And anyway, they called the police called CPS. CPS put her in a worse situation, and she stayed there for 12 years. What that meant repeatedly. She is messed up to this day.
And I'm going to object to based on hearsay. There's no evidence of who molested or raped or whatnot for the mother of these children. I also don't know why it is relevant with regard to this proceeding here today.
If you give me a minute.
Well, overruled, but Ms. Tillman, try to get to the point as quickly as you can.
Okay.
First of all, we only have about an hour and 10 minutes left in the workday, so get there quickly. If you want to finish the day, you need to get there quickly.
Okay. And the kids are just like their mother. Trinity is mean, just like her mother. Linda is messed up in her head like her mother. When I got Linda, she pushed all the food off the table. I mean, Linda goes to school and she lie and she cheat and she cuss. she do everything. And then she cries like she didn't do it or like it never happened, you know, and I have to get, but anyway, Linda, police came a couple of years ago and Linda posed nude and put it on the internet. I mean, Linda.
Okay, got it. I'm so sorry.
Is this on YouTube? Could we take